He thought the cave was just another shelter from a Rocky Mountain storm, but when he pried open the steel door hidden behind 200 years of rock and silence, what he found inside would turn a lonely mountain man into the guardian of $280 million and a secret that powerful people had died trying to protect. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The wind bit hard at 4,000 feet. Marcus Webb stood at the edge of a granite cliff, his weathered hands gripping a pair of binoculars, scanning the valley below for movement. Snow clung to the pine branches like forgotten prayers, and the sky stretched gray and endless above the Colorado Rockies. He was 43 years old, alone, and exactly where he wanted to be. Or at least that's what he told himself every morning when he woke to silence, so complete it felt like drowning. Marcus hadn't always been a mountain man. Once upon a time he'd worn steel-toed boots and a hard hat, swinging hammers on construction sites across Denver. He'd had a wife named Sarah, a daughter named Lily, and a mortgage on a split-level ranch house with a swing set in the backyard. He'd had birthday parties and grocery lists and arguments about whose turn it was to take out the trash. He'd had a life that made sense, a life with noise and color and reasons to come home at the end of the day. That was before the accident. Before the drunk driver ran the red light on a Tuesday afternoon in March of 2018. Before the funerals. Before the silence moved into his house and never left. For 2 years after, Marcus tried to keep living in that same house, sleeping in that same bed, walking past Lily's room with the door still closed. He went to work. He came home. He ate microwaved dinners standing over the sink. He became a ghost haunting his own life, drifting through rooms that smelled like emptiness and old grief. His friends stopped calling. His family stopped asking if he was okay. Everyone moved on because that's what people do. They survive, they adapt, they forget. But Marcus couldn't forget. So one day in early spring, he packed a truck with camping gear, winter clothes, tools, and a few photographs he couldn't leave behind. He drove west into the Rockies, past the last gas station, past the last paved road, past the last place where cell phones worked. He found a remote valley 30 miles from the nearest town, built himself a cabin from salvaged timber and sheer stubbornness, and disappeared. That was 5 years ago. 5 years of solitude. 5 years of chopping wood, hunting elk, fishing mountain streams, and talking to no one but himself and the occasional raven that perched outside his window. 5 years of trying to outrun memories that followed him like shadows. The cabin he'd built sat tucked into a grove of aspen and spruce, small and solid, smoke rising from the chimney on cold mornings. It had a wood stove, a narrow bed, shelves lined with canned goods and dried meat, and not much else. No electricity, no running water, no distractions. Just the rhythm of survival. Wake, eat, work, sleep, repeat. It was a simple life, a hard life. But it was his. Marcus lowered the binoculars and exhaled slowly, watching his breath fog in the frigid air. The elk herd he'd been tracking for 3 days had moved higher into the mountains, following the snow line. He'd need to go up after them if he wanted fresh meat before winter settled in hard. The forecast called for a storm by week's end, the kind that could bury the valley under 3 feet of snow and trap him in the cabin for weeks. He adjusted the straps on his pack, tightened the laces on his boots, and started climbing. The terrain was brutal. Loose rock, steep inclines, patches of ice hidden beneath snow. But Marcus had learned to read the mountain, to move with it instead of against it. His legs burned, his lungs ached. But he kept going, one step at a time, the way he'd learned to do everything since Sarah and Lily died. One step, one breath, one moment. By midday, he'd climbed nearly 1,000 feet. The air grew thinner, colder. The wind howled through narrow canyons, carrying the scent of pine and stone. He stopped to drink from his canteen, scanning the ridgeline for tracks. That's when he saw it. At first, he thought it was just a shadow, a trick of the light playing across the cliff face. But as he moved closer, squinting against the glare of snow, he realized it was something else. A dark hollow carved into the rock, partially hidden behind a curtain of frozen vines and icicles. A cave. Marcus had explored dozens of caves over the years. Most were shallow, just natural alcoves worn smooth by wind and water. Good for shelter during storms, but nothing more. This one looked different, larger, deeper, and something about it pulled at him, a quiet instinct he'd learned to trust. He approached cautiously, boots crunching through snow, one hand on the knife strapped to his belt. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through sideways. He pulled a flashlight from his pack, clicked it on, and stepped inside. The temperature dropped immediately. The cave swallowed sound, turning his footsteps into muffled echoes. The walls were smooth, almost polished, carved by centuries of water flow. But as Marcus moved deeper, the natural rock gave way to something else, something deliberate. The walls had been worked, shaped. He ran his fingers along the surface and felt the unmistakable marks of tools, precise cuts and angles that nature didn't make. This wasn't just a cave, it was a dwelling. Someone had lived here. His pulse quickened. He'd heard stories about ancient cliff dwellings in the Rockies, settlements built by indigenous peoples hundreds of years ago. But those were protected sites, marked and studied. This was different. This was hidden, forgotten, lost to time. The passage widened into a larger chamber. Marcus swept the flashlight across the space, and his breath caught. The room was massive, at least 30 feet across, with a ceiling that soared 15 feet overhead. Alcoves had been carved into the walls, some fitted with flat stone shelves. In the center of the room sat a crude hearth, blackened with soot, and scattered around the space were remnants of habitation. Pottery shards, bits of woven fiber, tools made from bone and stone. But that wasn't what stopped him cold. What stopped him was the evidence that someone had been here recently. Very recently. In the corner near the back wall sat a modern camping lantern, the kind you could buy at any outdoor supply store. Beside it, a folded wool blanket, a tin cup, a leather-bound journal wrapped in plastic. Marcus knelt slowly, his mind racing. Someone else knew about this place. Someone had been living here, or at least visiting regularly. The lantern still had fuel in it. The blanket smelled faintly of smoke and sweat. The journal's pages were yellowed but intact. He picked up the journal carefully, almost reverently. The cover was embossed with initials, R.H. He opened it to the first page. The handwriting was neat, methodical, the work of someone who took their time. Day 1. Found this place purely by accident while surveying the northern ridge, unlike anything I've seen in 40 years of exploration. Preliminary assessment suggests pre-Columbian origin, possibly ancestral Puebloan, though the elevation is unusual. Will return with equipment. Marcus flipped through the pages. Entries spanned years, sketches of the cave system, notes about artifacts, observations about weather patterns and wildlife. And then, about halfway through, the tone changed. I've decided to stay. The world below has nothing left for me. This place, this beautiful, forgotten place, will be my sanctuary, my secret. Let them think I'm dead. Maybe I am. Marcus sat back on his heels, the journal resting in his lap. Whoever R.H. was, they'd been running from something too, just like him. The realization settled over him like a weight. He stood and continued exploring. The main chamber connected to a series of smaller rooms, each carved with the same precision. Some had been used for storage, others appeared to be sleeping quarters. And in the farthest room, barely accessible through a low, narrow tunnel, Marcus found something that made his heart pound. A steel door. Modern, industrial, completely out of place. It was set directly into the rock face, sealed with heavy bolts and a combination lock that looked military-grade. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to hide this, to protect whatever was behind it. Marcus ran his hands along the edges of the door. It was cold, solid, unyielding. He tried the lock, but of course it didn't budge. He stepped back, staring at it, questions multiplying in his mind like shadows. Why would someone install a vault door in an ancient cliff dwelling? What were they hiding? And where was RH now? He returned to the main chamber and sat near the hearth, opening the journal again. He read entry after entry, piecing together a story. RH had been an archaeologist, a professor at some university. They'd discovered this site in 1997 while conducting research. Over the years, they'd returned again and again, documenting, studying, falling in love with the isolation. And then, in 2012, something changed. The entries became cryptic, paranoid even. They're asking questions, too many questions. I told them I destroyed my notes, but they don't believe me. I need to disappear, truly disappear. A few pages later. Moved everything here. It's safe now. No one will find it. No one even knows this place exists except me. And finally, the last entry, dated November 14th, 2019. I'm tired, so tired. If someone finds this, know that I tried to do the right thing. I tried to protect what mattered. The combination is in the one place no one would think to look. Forgive me. Marcus closed the journal slowly. 2019. That was 4 years ago. He looked around the chamber again, noticing details he'd missed before. A thin layer of dust covered everything. The blanket, though folded, had the musty smell of something left untouched for years. No fresh footprints except his own. RH wasn't coming back. Whatever had driven them here, whatever secret they'd been protecting, it had died with them. Marcus should have left then, should have backed out of that cave, hiked down the mountain, and forgotten he'd ever found it. He had enough problems, enough ghosts. He didn't need someone else's. But he didn't leave. Something held him there, rooted him to that cold stone floor. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way the journal entries reminded him of his own spiral into isolation. Or maybe it was simply that for the first time in 5 years, he felt something other than numbness. He felt purpose. He spent the next hour searching the chamber thoroughly. He examined every alcove, every carved shelf, every shadowed corner. He was looking for the combination RH had mentioned, the one hidden in the one place no one would think to look. He found pottery fragments marked with symbols he didn't understand. He found tools so old they crumbled when he touched them. He found a stack of yellowed maps, hand-drawn, detailing the cave system in meticulous detail. But no combination, no numbers, no clues. The light outside was fading. Marcus checked his watch. Nearly 4 in the afternoon. He'd been in the cave for over 3 hours. The storm was supposed to hit tonight. If he didn't start back soon, he'd be trapped up here in the dark. He gathered the journal, the maps, and a few other items that seemed important, stuffing them carefully into his pack. He'd come back. After the storm passed, after he'd had time to think, he'd come back and figure this out. As he moved toward the entrance, his flashlight caught something he'd missed before. On the wall near the narrow tunnel that led to the steel door, someone had carved words into the stone. Fresh cuts, not ancient. The letters were small, easy to overlook. He stepped closer, heart pounding, and read, "Seek what you carried when you lost everything." Marcus froze. The words hit him like a punch to the chest. Seek what you carried when you lost everything. His mind raced back to that awful day in March of 2018, to the hospital, to the funerals, to the weeks of numbness that followed. What had he carried? grief, guilt, photos. He'd carried his wallet. In his wallet, he'd carried a photo of Sarah and Lily, one taken at Lily's 6th birthday party. She'd been wearing a pink dress and a paper crown, grinning so wide her eyes nearly disappeared. And on the back of that photo, in Sarah's handwriting, were 4 numbers. Lily's birthday, 0814, August 14th. Marcus's hands trembled as he pulled his wallet from his pocket. The leather was worn smooth from years of handling. He opened it and slid out the photo, the edges soft and bent. There they were, smiling at him across the years, frozen in a moment of joy he'd never get back. He turned the photo over. The numbers were still there, faded but legible. 0814. Could it be? Could RH have somehow known? No, that was impossible. Unless… Marcus looked at the carved message again. Seek what you carried when you lost everything. It wasn't specific to him. It was a riddle, a cipher. RH was speaking to whoever found this place, assuming they too were running from loss, carrying their grief like stones in their pockets. Everyone who ends up in places like this carries something. A photo, a letter, a memory made physical. And on that something there might be numbers, a date, an anniversary, a birthday, something meaningful enough to remember. Marcus's mind spun. Was he really about to try this? To use his daughter's birthday as a combination to open a vault built by a stranger in a hidden cave? It felt insane. It felt like fate. He checked his watch again. 4:30. The temperature was dropping fast. He could hear wind howling outside the cave entrance, the storm moving in faster than predicted. He had maybe an hour of safe hiking time left. Maybe. He made a decision. Screw the storm. He had to know. Marcus crawled back through the narrow tunnel, flashlight clenched between his teeth, pack scraping against stone. He emerged in the small chamber where the steel door waited, cold and imposing. He knelt in front of the combination lock, took a deep breath, and began to turn the dial. 0, 8, 1, 4. Nothing. He tried again, slower this time, making sure each number clicked into place. 0, 8, 1, 4. Still nothing. Frustration burned in his chest. Of course it wasn't that simple. Life was never that simple. He sat back, thinking. Maybe it wasn't the birthday itself. Maybe it was the year. 2012, the year Sarah and Lily died. No, that was 6 digits. The lock only had 4. What else? Their anniversary? June 23rd, 0623. He tried it. Nothing. The house number? Their street address? Lily's age when she died? He tried combination after combination, each failure tightening the knot in his stomach. Outside, the wind grew louder. Snow began to fall, visible through the cave entrance, thick and fast. Marcus closed his eyes. He was missing something. The message had been clear. Seek what you carried when you lost everything, not what you remembered, what you carried. He pulled out his wallet again, emptying its contents onto the stone floor. The photo of Sarah and Lily. A $20 bill, creased and worn. An expired driver's license. A library card he'd never returned. And tucked in the back, behind everything else, something he'd forgotten was there. A tiny folded piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully. It was a receipt from a coffee shop, dated March 14th, 2018. The day before the accident. Sarah's handwriting was scrawled across the back. Don't forget, 1735 at the storage unit. Love you. 1735. Their storage unit combination. He'd never gone back for their things. Never cleaned it out. The number had meant nothing to him, just another remnant of a life that didn't exist anymore. But now his hands were shaking as he turned to the lock again. 1, 7, 3, 5. The lock clicked. The sound echoed through the small chamber like a gunshot. Marcus's heart stopped. Slowly, barely breathing, he turned the handle. The steel door swung open with a heavy groan, releasing a rush of stale, cold air. Darkness yawned beyond, absolute and waiting. Marcus aimed his flashlight into the void, and what the beam revealed made him forget how to breathe. The room beyond was larger than he'd imagined, carved deep into the mountain itself. And filling nearly every inch of space were stacks, rows, mountains, cash, gold bars, wooden crates stamped with museum markings, glass cases containing artifacts that gleamed even in the dim light. And in the center of it all, sitting on a makeshift table made of stone, was a handwritten note weighted down by a gold coin the size of a hockey puck. Marcus stepped inside on legs that barely held him. He picked up the note with trembling fingers and read, "If you found this, then you've lost everything too. You understand why some things must be hidden from a world that only knows how to take. Guard this well. Use it wisely. And maybe, just maybe, it will help you find what I couldn't, a reason to keep living. R.H." The flashlight slipped from Marcus's fingers, clattering to the stone floor. The beam spun wildly, illuminating stacks of $100 bills bound with rubber bands, gold bars stamped with dates from the 1920s and 30s, artifacts that belonged in the Smithsonian. $280 million. That's what the note said. $280 million in cash, gold, and stolen antiquities hidden in a cave that didn't exist on any map, guarded by a dead man's riddle and a secret combination that only someone broken enough to understand would ever solve. Marcus Webb had come to the mountains to disappear, to become nothing, to let the silence swallow him whole. Instead, he'd found a fortune, a mystery, and the terrifying realization that his isolation was about to end in ways he couldn't begin to imagine. The storm howled outside, sealing the cave entrance with snow, and Marcus sat in the darkness surrounded by wealth he never wanted, holding a note from a stranger who understood his pain, wondering what the hell he was supposed to do now. Marcus didn't sleep that first night. He'd managed to make it back to his cabin just as the storm unleashed its full fury, stumbling through knee-deep snow in near-total darkness. His hands were numb. His legs shook with exhaustion. But his mind raced like an engine with no off-switch. $280 million. The number kept repeating in his head like a mantra, like a curse. He'd seen it with his own eyes, touched it with his own hands, and still couldn't make himself believe it was real. People didn't just stumble onto fortunes hidden in mountain caves. That was the stuff of movies and fairy tales, not the life of a broken-down hermit who talked to ravens and ate beans straight from the can. He sat by the wood stove, journal pages spread across his small table, reading by lamplight. R.H.'s entries filled in some gaps, but they raised even more questions. The handwriting changed over the years, from neat and professional to shaky and desperate. Entire sections had been written in some kind of code, symbols Marcus didn't recognize. Other pages had been torn out completely, leaving ragged edges and mysteries. But one entry, dated July 9, 2014, stopped him cold. Moved the Denver collection today. 43 pieces, including the Cortez masks and the Chaco cylinder. Insurance values at $18 million, but their real worth is incalculable. Morrison's people are getting too close. They know I didn't turn everything over to the university. The threats have escalated. Found a dead crow nailed to my office door this morning. Message received. I'm leaving tonight. The cave is the only place they'll never think to look. Marcus read it 3 times. Morrison's people. Threats. A collection worth $18 million, and that was just one load. How many trips had R.H. made? How many years had they spent smuggling artifacts and cash into that hidden vault? He flipped back through earlier entries, looking for context. The picture that emerged made his stomach turn. R.H., whose full name appeared to be Roland Harper, according to a signature on one document, had been a prominent archaeologist and professor at the University of Colorado. Respected, published, connected to museums and private collectors across the country. But somewhere along the way, things had gone wrong. An entry from March 3, 2009. The board rejected my proposal again. 30 years of fieldwork, of discoveries that rewrote regional history, and they want to shut down the program. Budget cuts, they say. Meanwhile, they're building a new athletics complex for $60 million. Morrison offered me a deal. Private funding, no oversight, but I'd have to share fines with his clients. I told him no. Some things aren't for sale. Then, 6 months later, I made a mistake. Morrison's offer wasn't a negotiation. It was a warning. 2 of my grad students were mugged last week. My car was vandalized. Someone broke into my home office and went through my files. Nothing taken, just moved. They want me to know they can reach me anywhere. Marcus stood and paced the small cabin, his boots creaking on the wooden floor. Roland Harper hadn't just hidden a fortune. He'd hidden evidence. Artifacts that powerful people wanted, pieces that could prove theories or destroy reputations. And somewhere in that process, he'd crossed a line, taking things that didn't belong to him, building a collection that museums would kill for. The storm raged for 3 days. Marcus spent every waking hour reading through the journal, making notes, trying to piece together a timeline. The maps Roland had drawn were incredibly detailed, showing not just the main cave, but a network of connected chambers Marcus hadn't explored yet. Some were marked with symbols. Others had cryptic notes: secondary cache, emergency exit, water source, test before drinking. On the 4th morning, the sky finally cleared. Marcus woke to brilliant sunlight reflecting off fresh snow. The world outside his cabin transformed into something clean and blinding. He made coffee, ate a cold breakfast of jerky and hardtack, and started packing. He filled his largest backpack with supplies: rope, climbing gear, extra flashlights, batteries, tools, water, food for 3 days. He had no idea how long this would take, but he wasn't coming back until he'd seen everything, documented everything, understood what he'd stumbled into. The hike up took twice as long as before. The storm had dumped nearly 4 feet of snow across the mountain, burying trails and landmarks. Several times Marcus had to stop and check his compass, making sure he wasn't drifting off course. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe, each inhalation like swallowing ice. But eventually, after 5 brutal hours of climbing, he found it. The cave entrance was almost completely hidden now, buried under snow and ice. He spent 20 minutes digging it out with a folding shovel, clearing a gap just wide enough to squeeze through. Inside, the temperature was warmer, relatively speaking, maybe 30 degrees instead of the 15 outside. Marcus clicked on his headlamp and moved through the familiar passage into the main chamber. Everything looked exactly as he'd left it. The hearth, the shelves, the camping lantern in the corner. But this time, he wasn't rushing. This time, he had light, time, and purpose. He started systematically, photographing everything with a small digital camera he'd brought. The pottery shards arranged on stone shelves, the bone tools carefully placed in alcoves, the woven fibers that had somehow survived centuries in this dry, protected space. Roland's notes claimed some of these artifacts dated back to the 1200s, created by ancestral Puebloan peoples who'd built elaborate cliff dwellings throughout the Southwest. But this site was different. The elevation was wrong. The location was wrong. According to everything Marcus had read in Roland's journal, no major settlements should exist this far north, this high up, which meant either the history books were incomplete or Roland had moved artifacts here from other sites, creating a kind of private museum. Marcus worked for hours, moving from chamber to chamber, filling notebook pages with sketches and observations. The dwelling was far larger than he'd initially realized. The main chamber connected to at least 7 smaller rooms, each with a specific purpose: storage, sleeping quarters, what looked like a ceremonial space with pictographs still visible on the walls. And everywhere, signs of Roland's habitation layered over ancient occupation like palimpsest. In one of the smaller chambers, Marcus found something new: a laptop, old and dusty, connected to what appeared to be a solar battery system. He pressed the power button, not expecting anything, but the screen flickered to life. Password protected, of course. He tried a few obvious combinations, then gave up. He'd take it with him, maybe find someone who could crack it. The narrow tunnel leading to the steel vault felt even more claustrophobic the second time. Marcus crawled through on his belly, pack scraping rock, breath echoing in the confined space. When he emerged into the small antechamber, he paused, steeling himself. The vault door stood open, exactly as he'd left it. Beyond, darkness waited. He stepped inside, headlamp cutting through the black, and forced himself to really look this time, to process, to count. The cash was stacked in plastic bins, organized by denomination. Hundreds, 50s, 20s, all used bills, nothing sequential, nothing that would raise flags if spent carefully. Marcus did rough math in his head. Each bin probably held close to $1 million. There were at least 40 bins. The gold bars were arranged on wooden pallets, each stamped with dates and weight measurements. Most were from the 1920s and 30s, probably melted down from coins during the Great Depression. Marcus lifted one. It had to weigh 30 pounds. There were dozens of them. But the artifacts, those were what made his hands shake. Glass display cases lined one entire wall, each containing pieces that belonged in the Smithsonian or the British Museum. Ceremonial masks with turquoise inlay. Pottery so intact and detailed it looked like it had been fired yesterday. Woven blankets in geometric patterns that hurt to look at. They were so perfect. Stone tools that predated European contact by centuries. And in a locked case at the very back, something that made Marcus's breath catch: human remains. Not complete skeletons, but pieces, skulls, bones, each carefully labeled with location data and carbon dating estimates. This wasn't just theft. This was desecration. Marcus sat down hard on one of the wooden crates, suddenly dizzy. Roland Harper hadn't just stolen money and artifacts. He'd robbed graves. He'd taken sacred objects, human remains, things that should have been left in peace or returned to tribal communities. A new document caught his eye, tucked into a waterproof sleeve and taped to the wall. He pulled it down and read, "Inventory and Authentication compiled by R. Harper, Ph.D. Last updated November 2019. The list was staggering. 47 pages of single-spaced entries, each item meticulously described with provenance, estimated value, and authentication notes. Marcus flipped through, his stomach sinking with each page. Ancestral Pueblo and ceremonial mask, circa 1300 AD, turquoise and shell inlay, recovered from Chaco Canyon unauthorized excavation, estimated value $2.4 million. Fremont culture burial artifacts, circa 900 AD, including complete ceremonial staff, recovered from Range Creek, estimated value $1.8 million. Clovis Point collection, 43 pieces, various Colorado sites, oldest specimen carbon dated to 11,200 years BP, estimated value $3.6 million. On and on it went. Piece after piece, site after site, a lifetime of illegal excavation, theft, and hoarding. The total value at the bottom of the last page made Marcus's vision blur. Total collection value, conservative estimate, $278,600,000. 278 million. Roland had been off by about 1.5 million, but close enough. Marcus set the document down and noticed something else. A sealed envelope taped beneath it, marked "Read this first" in bold letters. He'd missed it the first time, too overwhelmed to notice. He opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, handwritten on university letterhead, dated November 12, 2019. To whoever finds this. If you're reading this, I'm dead. I've known for months that it was coming. Morrison's people have been closing in, asking questions in town, checking property records, talking to rangers. They know I didn't turn over the full collection like I promised. They know I kept the best pieces. And they will kill me for it. They've killed before. 3 of my colleagues who refused to cooperate died in accidents that were anything but accidental. I won't give them the satisfaction of torture. I'll end this on my terms. But I couldn't destroy the collection. These pieces, they represent lifetimes of work, centuries of culture, the physical proof of civilizations that historians claimed never existed this far north. Yes, I took them illegally. Yes, I should have turned them over to proper authorities. But those authorities would have locked them in basements, filed them away, let them gather dust while arguing over jurisdiction and tribal claims. Here at least, they're preserved, protected, safe from Morrison and people like him who see artifacts as investment opportunities, who'd sell them to the highest bidder regardless of cultural significance. If you found this place, you're like me, running, hiding, looking for somewhere the world can't touch you. I understand that. I chose you by choosing this location, by creating a puzzle only someone desperate and clever could solve. Now you have a choice. You can take the money and run. God knows there's enough here to disappear anywhere on Earth. Or you can do what I couldn't. You can find a way to return these pieces to the people they were stolen from, to make right what I made wrong. The money is yours regardless. I stole it from Morrison's operation, cash he was laundering through fake archaeological foundations. He stole it from museums and insurance fraud. It's dirty money, but it's yours if you want it. The artifacts, though, those belong to someone else. To the descendants of the people who created them. To the tribes whose ancestors were robbed. I'm asking you, whoever you are, to be braver than I was. To do the right thing even when it's hard. In the laptop, password 0416, you'll find documentation for everything. Provenance, authentication, GPS coordinates for original discovery sites. Everything you'd need to return these pieces properly. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to do it myself. I hope you are. Roland Harper. What happens next will challenge everything Marcus thought he understood about right and wrong, push him into a dangerous world of powerful people who kill to protect their secrets, and force him to decide whether some fortunes are worth keeping or if the only way to truly be free is to give it all away. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Marcus read the letter 4 times, hands shaking more with each pass. Roland Harper had been murdered, or he'd killed himself to avoid being murdered. Either way, he was dead because of what sat in this vault. And now Marcus, who'd come to the mountains to disappear, was sitting on a target that powerful people would absolutely kill for. He stood abruptly, suddenly feeling trapped. The walls seemed to close in. The air felt thinner. He needed to get out, to think, to process. But as he turned toward the exit, his headlamp caught something he'd missed before. Another door. This one smaller, set low in the back wall, partially hidden behind stacks of plastic bins. It wasn't steel like the main vault. It was wood, old and weathered, with an iron ring for a handle. Marcus moved the bins aside, muscles straining. The door was maybe 3 feet high, built into what looked like a natural crevice in the rock. He tried the iron ring. Locked. He searched the immediate area, looking for a key. Nothing. Then he remembered the laptop. Maybe the password would unlock more than just files. He crawled back through the tunnel to the chamber where he'd found the computer. It was still powered on, screen dimmed but active. He typed in the password Roland had provided, 0416. April 16th. Roland's birthday, according to an entry Marcus had read. The desktop appeared. Folders, files, a photograph as wallpaper showing a younger Roland standing in front of the Chaco Canyon ruins, smiling, whole. Marcus clicked through folders until he found one labeled Security Protocols. Inside were documents, diagrams, and a video file. He double-clicked the video. Roland's face filled the screen, gaunt and exhausted, filmed in this very cave. The date stamp showed November 13th, 2019, just a day after the letter was written. If you're watching this, video Roland said, then you found the laptop and you're wondering about the secondary vault. I'll save you time. The key is in the hearth, buried under the third stone from the left. But before you open it, you need to understand what's inside and why it's separate from everything else. Video Roland paused, rubbing his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. The main collection, the artifacts and gold, that's valuable. But it's not why Morrison wants me dead. What's in the secondary vault, that's different. That's evidence. Documents proving Morrison and his associates have been running a black market antiquities network for over 20 years. Names, dates, transactions, photographs. Everything needed to bring down his entire operation and put about 40 very wealthy, very powerful people in federal prison. Marcus's pulse quickened. I compiled it all over 10 years, Roland continued. Every shady deal I witnessed, every artifact I watched them sell to private collectors, every bribe to museum officials and university administrators. I documented it because I thought, naively, that I could use it as leverage. Insurance. But insurance only works if people believe you'll actually use it. And they know me well enough to know I never would. I'm too much of a coward. Roland's voice cracked. So they're coming for me anyway. Maybe not today. Maybe not this month. But soon. And when they find out the documents are missing, they'll tear apart every place I've ever worked, every site I've ever excavated. But they won't find this cave. I made sure of that. He leaned closer to the camera. If you're watching this, you have a decision to make. You can take those documents to the FBI. You can blow the whole thing open. But understand, the moment you do, you become the target. These people have resources you can't imagine. They own judges. They have friends in law enforcement. They will come for you. Roland sat back. Or you can do what I did. Hide. Keep the secret. Let the guilty stay free and live with that weight for the rest of your life. It's not the brave choice, but it's the safe one. The video ended abruptly. The screen went black, then returned to the desktop. Marcus sat frozen. Every instinct screamed at him to pack up, walk away, pretend he'd never found this place. He'd come to the mountains to escape complications, to live simply. This was the opposite of simple. But Roland's words echoed in his head. I hope you are brave enough to do what I couldn't. Marcus closed the laptop and made his way back to the main chamber. The hearth was cold, filled with ash and partially burned wood. He dug through it until he found the stones that formed its base, third from the left. He pried it up with his knife. Underneath, wrapped in oilcloth, was a key. Brass, small, old-fashioned. He carried it back to the vault, crawled through the tunnel one more time, and approached the wooden door. The key slid into the lock like it had been waiting. Marcus turned it. The lock clicked. The door swung inward. The space beyond was tiny, barely a closet, but it was climate-controlled somehow, moisture-sealed, professional. And stacked inside were waterproof cases, the kind used by the military to transport sensitive documents. Marcus opened the first case. File folders, hundreds of them, each labeled with dates, names, locations. He pulled one at random. Morrison-Kellerman transaction, August 2007, Mayan Staley, Guatemala origin, sold to private collector Dubai, price 4.2 million, authentication forged. Inside were photographs of the Steely, emails between Morrison and someone named Kellerman discussing transport logistics, bank statements showing wire transfers, even a photograph of Morrison and Kellerman shaking hands in front of the artifact. Marcus opened another case, more of the same, dozens of transactions, hundreds of stolen pieces, a network that stretched from the American Southwest to South America, from the Middle East to Southeast Asia. Museums robbed, sites looted, indigenous communities devastated, and at the center of it all, a man named James Morrison. His photograph appeared again and again. Late 50s, expensive suits, silver hair, the kind of face that belonged on corporate boards and charity galas. His company, Heritage Acquisitions International, operated out of Denver with satellite offices in New York, London, and Hong Kong. Marcus sat among the cases, overwhelmed. Roland had compiled a prosecutorial dream. This wasn't just evidence. This was a gift-wrapped case that could destroy an empire. But it was also a death sentence for whoever tried to use it. He spent the next 6 hours going through everything, photographing documents with his camera, making notes, trying to understand the scope. The operation was massive. Conservative estimates put Morrison's network profits at over $3 billion across 2 decades. $3 billion made from stolen history, from robbing cultures of their heritage. In one case, Marcus found personnel files, associates, dealers, smugglers, corrupt officials, judges in 3 states, museum curators in 6 countries, politicians, police officers, federal agents. The rot went everywhere. And then he found his own connection, a file labeled Potential Threats. Inside were dossiers on people who'd gotten too close, asked too many questions, needed to be dealt with. Some had been bribed, others intimidated. 3 had died in accidents. One name jumped out: Sarah Webb, Marcus's dead wife. His hands went numb. He opened the file with shaking fingers. Sarah had been an insurance investigator for a major firm. 3 years before she died, she'd been assigned to investigate a claim filed by a museum in Santa Fe. A collection of pre-Columbian artifacts had been stolen, insured for $12 million. The museum claimed thieves broke in and cleaned out their archive, but Sarah had been suspicious. Her notes, photocopied and included in Morrison's file, showed she'd found inconsistencies. The security footage had been too conveniently corrupted. The artifacts stolen were specifically the ones with the highest insurance values and the murkiest provenance. She suspected insurance fraud. Her investigation had flagged Heritage Acquisitions International as a potential buyer. She'd requested interviews with Morrison and his staff. She'd started asking questions. And then, according to the final note in the file, dated February 26, 2018, Webb investigation becoming problematic. Recommend immediate action. Severance approved. Severance. 2 weeks later, Sarah and Lily were dead, killed by a drunk driver who'd run a red light. The driver, according to police reports Marcus had read 100 times, was a 31-year-old man with no prior record named Thomas Kellerman. Kellerman. The same name that appeared in Morrison's files as an associate, a dealer, someone who handled wet work. Marcus's vision tunneled. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. The cave spun around him. It hadn't been an accident. Sarah hadn't died because of bad luck and a drunk driver. She'd been murdered, assassinated. And Lily, his beautiful 6-year-old daughter, had been collateral damage in a hit meant to silence an insurance investigator who'd gotten too close. He doubled over, stomach heaving. Nothing came up. He hadn't eaten in hours. But his body tried anyway, rejecting the truth it couldn't digest. They'd taken everything from him. Not fate, not chance. Them. Morrison and his network of thieves and killers. They'd stolen his wife and daughter as casually as they'd stolen artifacts, as easily as they'd robbed graves. Marcus knelt on the cold stone floor, surrounded by evidence of evil, and felt something shift deep in his chest. The numbness that had insulated him for 5 years cracked. Beneath it, something molten and terrible burned. Rage, pure crystalline rage. Roland had asked him to be brave, to do the right thing, to return the artifacts and expose the network. But Roland hadn't known what Marcus now knew. Roland hadn't lost his family to these people. Roland had the luxury of hiding, of choosing safety over justice. Marcus didn't have that luxury anymore. This wasn't about artifacts or money or doing the right thing in some abstract moral sense. This was personal. This was vengeance. This was war. He stood slowly, legs steady, mind clear for the first time in 5 years. He knew exactly what he had to do. He was going to take every piece of evidence in this cave. He was going to learn everything about Morrison's network, and then he was going to tear it down, piece by piece, person by person, until everyone responsible for Sarah and Lily's deaths was destroyed. The fortune meant nothing to him. The artifacts could rot, but the evidence, the names, the proof that could put monsters in cages, that was worth dying for. Marcus loaded case after case into his pack, working through the night, making trip after trip down the mountain to cache documents in locations only he knew. He worked with mechanical precision, no longer cold, no longer tired, running on fury and purpose. By the time dawn broke over the Rockies, Marcus Webb was no longer the broken man who'd come to the mountains to die in silence. He was something else now, something dangerous. And James Morrison's carefully constructed empire was about to learn what happened when you took everything from a man who had nothing left to lose. Marcus spent 3 days moving between the cave and various hiding spots he'd scouted across the mountain. He worked in a trance, driven by something beyond exhaustion. Every case of documents got photographed, catalogued, and hidden in separate locations. Rock crevices, hollow trees, buried caches marked with coordinates only he would remember. If Morrison's people somehow found the cave, they wouldn't find everything. Marcus made sure of that. But the artifacts remained. The cache remained. The gold remained. And Marcus still had no clear plan for any of it. On the 4th morning, he returned to the cave with a different purpose. He needed to understand Roland Harper completely. Not just the crimes he'd documented or the fortune he'd hidden, but who he was, why he'd made the choices he'd made, what had driven a respected archaeologist to become a thief and a hermit. The main chamber felt different now, less threatening, almost familiar. Marcus had spent so many hours here over the past week that he'd started to notice small details, the way light filtered through cracks in the rock at certain times of day, the smell of ancient stone mixed with Roland's camping gear, the echo patterns that changed depending on where you stood. He settled near the hearth with Roland's journal and several boxes of papers he'd found stashed in various alcoves. These weren't the clinical inventory lists or legal documents. These were personal. Letters, photographs, sketches, diary entries that Roland had kept separate from everything else. Marcus opened a leather portfolio marked Before. Inside were photographs from Roland's previous life. A younger man, maybe in his 30s, standing with students at an excavation site. Everyone smiling, covered in dirt, triumphant. Roland receiving an award at some academic ceremony, shaking hands with a university president. Roland and a woman both laughing, sitting on a porch swing. The woman was beautiful, dark-haired, her hand resting on Roland's knee. A note was paper-clipped to that photo. Catherine, last summer before the diagnosis, last time everything was normal. Marcus flipped through more images. Catherine appeared in dozens of them, hiking, reading, working at her own excavation sites. She'd been an archaeologist too, Marcus realized. Partners in work and life. He found a letter, dated August 15th, 2003, written in a woman's handwriting. My dearest Roland, the doctors confirmed what we already knew. Stage 4. 6 months, maybe 8 if the treatment works. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of leaving you alone. You're brilliant, but you've never been good at being alone. Promise me you won't disappear into your work. Promise me you'll keep living, not just existing. All my love, Catherine. Marcus's throat tightened. He knew that kind of letter. He'd received similar words from Sarah in the early days of their relationship, though under different circumstances. That specific intimacy of people who knew each other's deepest faults and loved them anyway. He found Catherine's death certificate. November 2nd, 2004. Ovarian cancer. She'd lasted longer than the doctors predicted, 15 months instead of 8. And then Roland's journal entries changed. The neat, methodical handwriting became erratic, desperate. November 3rd, 2004. She's gone. The house is too quiet. Her coffee mug is still on the counter. I can't bring myself to wash it. I can't bring myself to do anything except exist. The university wants me back in January. I don't know how to tell them I'm never coming back. Marcus read entry after entry, watching Roland's grief unfold in ink and paper. It was horrifyingly familiar. The same spiral Marcus had experienced after losing Sarah and Lily. The same inability to function. The same desire to simply stop existing. But Roland's story took a different turn. 6 months after Catherine died, he'd thrown himself back into work with obsessive intensity. Excavations that lasted weeks without breaks, research that kept him in his office until dawn. Anything to avoid going home to that empty house with Catherine's coffee mug gathering dust. That's when Morrison had approached him. The journal entry from June 7th, 2005 painted the picture. Morrison came to my office today. I'd heard rumors about him, private collector, deep pockets, questionable ethics. He made an offer. Double funding for my research, no university oversight, no bureaucratic delays. In exchange, I'd consult on his acquisitions, verify authenticity, provide provenance documentation. He made it sound legitimate, academic partnership with private sector. I said I'd think about it. The truth is, I need the distraction. I need something, anything, to fill the silence Catherine left behind. Marcus stood and paced, journal in hand, reading as he moved. Roland's descent was gradual but inevitable. First consultation led to second. Authentication work led to acquisition advice. Before long, Roland was helping Morrison identify targets. Collections that could be stolen, sites that could be looted, artifacts that could be sold to private buyers with no questions asked. The justifications appeared in the margins of Roland's notes. These pieces would just sit in museum basements anyway. Universities don't appreciate what they have. At least Morrison's clients will display them, treasure them. But the reality was uglier. An entry from March 12, 2008. Watched Morrison's team loot a burial site today in southern Utah. They tore through it like animals. Bones scattered, pottery smashed. They only wanted the intact pieces, the valuable ones. Everything else was garbage to them. I stood there and said nothing. I've become complicit in desecration. Catherine would be ashamed of me. Marcus found photographs documenting the decline. Roland at various sites, his face growing harder, more hollow. Standing beside Morrison at estate sales and private auctions. Shaking hands with people whose names Marcus now recognized from the evidence files. Dealers, smugglers, corrupt officials. In one photograph, Marcus noticed something in the background. A younger man, maybe late 20s, standing slightly apart from the group. He had Morrison's eyes, the same calculating expression. Marcus flipped the photo over. Roland had written, "Morrison's son, Derek, more ruthless than his father, handles enforcement. I've seen what he does to people who cross them." Marcus set the photo aside and continued reading. He found receipts showing payments Roland received from Morrison. Small at first, consulting fees of 5 or 10,000, then larger, 50,000 for authentication services, 100,000 as a finder's fee for identifying a collection. By 2011, Roland was pulling in $500,000 a year from Morrison's network. He'd lived well during those years. Another photograph showed Roland standing in front of a restored Victorian house in Boulder, keys in hand, smiling. The caption read, "New beginning. Catherine would have loved this place." But subsequent entries revealed the house stayed empty most of the time. Roland was always traveling, always working, always running from the silence. And then, in 2012, everything changed. A letter, still in its envelope, addressed to Roland from a law firm in Denver. Federal investigation into heritage acquisitions, international and associated entities. This letter serves as notice that you may be called to testify. Roland's journal entry that day was brief. They're investigating Morrison. FBI raided 3 of his warehouses. Someone talked. Someone always talks. My name will come up. Everything I've done will come out. University will fire me. I'll lose my credentials. Maybe go to prison. I need to disappear. But Roland didn't just disappear. He stole. Over the next 6 months, according to meticulous records Marcus found in a locked box, Roland systematically diverted artifacts from Morrison's network. Pieces that Morrison had acquired through theft or fraud, Roland authenticated them, catalogued them, and then made them vanish before they could be sold. He skimmed cash from Morrison's money laundering operations. Small amounts at first, then larger. 50,000 here, 100,000 there. Amounts that could be blamed on transport costs or dealer fees. He hoarded gold that Morrison planned to melt down and sell. He copied documents, photographed evidence, built a case against the entire organization even as he robbed it blind. Marcus found a detailed timeline Roland had created showing exactly how he'd executed the thefts. June 17, 2012. Diverted Chaco collection during transport. Morrison's team thinks it was hijacked. 23 pieces now secure in cave location Alpha. August 3rd. Intercepted cash shipment from Dubai buyer. 4.2 million. Warehouse fire provided perfect cover. October 9th. Copied Morrison's personal files during office visit. Now have complete list of corrupt officials on payroll. The cave became his fortress, his sanctuary, his revenge. Every artifact he stole from Morrison was one less piece feeding the black market. Every dollar he took was one less funding the network. Every document he copied was another nail in Morrison's eventual coffin. Marcus found a letter Roland had written, but never sent, dated April 23rd, 2013. Dear Catherine, I know you can't read this. I know you're gone. But I need to tell someone, and there's no one left who would understand. I've become everything we used to despise. A thief, a grave robber, someone who puts price tags on sacred objects. But I'm trying to make it right. I'm stealing from the thieves. I'm hiding these pieces where Morrison can never sell them, where they'll be safe until someone braver than me can return them to their rightful owners. Is that redemption? Or just another layer of sin? I wish you were here to tell me. I wish you were here for anything. I'm so tired of being alone. Ah. Marcus sat down hard on a rock ledge, letter trembling in his hands. He understood Roland now, understood him completely. The man had been drowning in grief, grasping for anything to give his pain purpose. The theft wasn't about money. It was about control, about fighting back against a world that had taken everything he loved and offered nothing but meaningless survival in return. Marcus had been doing the same thing for 5 years. Different method, same disease. Roland had stolen artifacts. Marcus had stolen himself, vanishing into the mountains, hiding from a world that hurt too much to face. But now Marcus knew the truth. Sarah hadn't died in a random accident. She'd been murdered. And Roland had left him the tools to make it right, to bring down the people responsible. He opened another box, this one marked Final Accounting. Inside were ledgers showing the full scope of what Roland had hidden in the cave. The inventory was even more extensive than Marcus had realized. Cash: $73,200,000 in various denominations. Gold: 41 million in bars and coins from the 1920s and 30s. Artifacts: 164 million based on insurance valuations and black market prices. Total: $278,200,000. And a note in Roland's handwriting. This represents approximately 37% of Morrison's liquid assets and recovered inventory as of November 2019. The remainder is in his warehouses, bank accounts, and private collections. Seizing this cash will cripple his operation but not destroy it. Only the evidence files can do that. Use both together. Marcus's mind raced. Roland had thought of everything. He'd built a two-pronged attack. The missing fortune would make Morrison desperate, expose him, force mistakes. And the evidence would destroy him legally, methodically, completely. In the bottom of the box, Marcus found something else that made his blood run cold. A small leather notebook, newer than the others, with entries dated from just weeks before Roland's death. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible in places. October 28, 2019. They know I'm alive. Spotted Morrison's son Derek in town yesterday. He pretended not to see me, but I know better. They're watching, waiting to see where I lead them. I've been so careful for so long. One mistake, one trip into town for supplies. That's all it took. November 1st. Someone broke into my Boulder house. Nothing taken, but they left a message. Photographs of me at the cave entrance, taken with a telephoto lens from across the valley. They know about this place. They've known for weeks, maybe months. Just waiting for me to lead them to everything I've hidden. November 8th. Saw tire tracks on the access road. Fresh. They're getting bolder. I need to finish the security measures, collapse the secondary tunnels, leave only one way in and out, make it impossible for them to extract everything quickly if they do find it. Marcus's hands shook as he read. Roland had known he was being hunted, had known his time was running out. The cave wasn't just a hiding place. It was a trap, carefully designed to slow down anyone who came looking. The final entry was dated November 13th, 2019. It ends tomorrow. I can feel it. Derek Morrison is in town with a team. Professional. Military trained. They'll come at dawn. Standard tactical approach. I won't be here when they arrive. I've set everything in motion. The evidence is distributed. The fortune is secured. The cave will give up its secrets only to someone worthy. Someone who solves the riddles. Someone who understands loss the way I do. If you're reading this, you're that person. Don't let my cowardice at the end diminish what I'm leaving you. Fight them. Destroy them. Make my death mean something. R.H. Below the entry, in different ink, shakier handwriting. I'm sorry, Catherine. I'm so sorry I couldn't be what you asked me to be. Maybe in dying I can finally do something brave. Marcus closed the notebook, vision blurring. Roland had committed suicide, not out of despair, but as a final act of defiance. He'd denied Morrison the satisfaction of capture, of torture, of forcing him to reveal where everything was hidden. But there was something else in the box, a sealed envelope marked, "Open only if you choose justice." Marcus's hands shook as he tore it open. Inside was a letter in Roland's handwriting dated November 13th, 2019, the day before he died. You've read this far, which means you're seriously considering exposing Morrison. You need to know what you're facing. James Morrison is not just a criminal. He's connected, protected. I've documented 43 instances where law enforcement investigations into his network were mysteriously shut down. He has federal judges in his pocket, state prosecutors, police chiefs, even some FBI agents. The corruption runs everywhere. If you approach the wrong person, you'll disappear. They'll make it look like an accident, just like they do with everyone who gets too close. I've included a list of people I believe are clean: law enforcement, journalists, prosecutors who've shown integrity, but I can't guarantee any of them. Trust is a luxury neither of us can afford. My advice: don't go through official channels at all. Leak everything anonymously. Send the documents to multiple journalists simultaneously. Make it impossible to contain. Then disappear. Take the money and vanish. That's what I should have done. But I was too weak, too tired, too ready to give up. You might be stronger. If you are, if you choose to fight, know that you're risking everything. Morrison will come for you with every resource he has. He will hunt you relentlessly. You will never be safe again. But you'll have done something I couldn't. You'll have made them pay. Choose wisely. R.H. Marcus reread the letter 3 times, each word cutting deeper. Roland was offering him a playbook and a warning. Revenge was possible, but the cost would be everything. His anonymity, his safety, his peaceful isolation in the mountains, possibly his life. Could he do it? Could he walk away from 5 years of carefully constructed solitude and throw himself into a war against people who'd already murdered his family? He stood and walked to the vault entrance, staring at the stacks of cash and gold. He could take the money, right now. Load it into his truck over several trips, drive to Mexico or Canada, start over somewhere warm with a new name and endless resources. Let Morrison keep operating. Let the guilty stay free, survive. Or he could honor Sarah, honor Lily, honor Roland, fight. The choice should have been harder. But as Marcus stood there, surrounded by Roland Harper's legacy and the evidence of his wife's murder, he realized the decision had already been made. 5 years ago, in the smoking wreckage of his old life, he'd chosen survival. He'd chosen numbness. He'd chosen hiding. Not anymore. Marcus returned to the main chamber and began gathering specific items. Roland's laptop with all the digitized evidence, the personnel files showing Morrison's network, the list of potentially trustworthy contacts, the financial records showing money trails, everything he'd need to build an airtight case. He worked methodically, creating priority lists in his head. The most damning evidence went into his primary pack. Secondary documentation got cached in various locations throughout the cave system. He photographed page after page with his camera, creating digital backups that he uploaded to encrypted cloud storage using the laptop's spotty connection. Hours passed. The light filtering through the cave entrance changed from morning gold to afternoon gray. Marcus's back ached from bending over documents. His eyes burned from reading small print by headlamp. But he kept working, driven by a purpose he hadn't felt in years. He was so focused that he almost missed the sound. A distant rumble, mechanical, growing louder. An engine. Maybe 2. Marcus froze. No one came up here. The nearest road was 15 miles away, and even that was barely passable. The cave was invisible from any trail, hidden behind rock formations and thick forest. No one should know it existed, unless someone did. He killed his headlamp and moved silently to the cave entrance. The snow outside was pristine, except for his own tracks leading up the mountain. But the engine sound was getting closer, echoing off canyon walls, making it hard to pinpoint direction. Then he saw them. 2 black SUVs, modified for mountain terrain, crawling up a ridgeline about a quarter-mile away. They moved with purpose, following a route that didn't exist on any map, heading directly toward this section of cliff face. Marcus's blood turned to ice. They knew. Somehow, impossibly, they knew about the cave. He watched as the vehicles stopped about 500 yards below the cave entrance. Doors opened. Men emerged, 6 of them, all dressed in tactical gear, carrying equipment that looked military-grade. One of them pulled out surveying tools and started taking measurements, checking coordinates. Marcus recognized the lead man even from this distance. He'd seen his photograph in Rowland's files dozens of times. James Morrison himself, silver hair gleaming even in the dull mountain light, expensive coat completely inappropriate for the terrain. Morrison pointed directly at the cliff face where Marcus hid. The other men started unpacking climbing gear. Marcus backed away from the entrance, mind racing. How did they find this place? Rowland had been so careful. No GPS coordinates in his journals, no maps with landmarks. The cave didn't appear in any geological surveys or historical records. Then Marcus remembered. The laptop. He'd powered it on, used the Wi-Fi to email himself copies of critical files. Old laptop. Probably had tracking software installed. Morrison's people had been monitoring it, waiting for someone to activate it. And Marcus had led them straight here like an idiot. He had maybe 15 minutes before they reached the entrance. Not enough time to move the evidence. Not enough time to hide the fortune. Not enough time to do anything except run or fight. Marcus looked around the chamber frantically. The cave had multiple passages, but he'd only explored a few of them. Rowland's maps showed an emergency exit somewhere in the back, but Marcus hadn't located it yet. The main entrance was about to be compromised. If he stayed, he was trapped. But if he ran, Morrison would have everything. The artifacts, the cash, the gold, and worst of all, the evidence. Without those documents, Morrison would never face justice. Sarah's murder would remain unsolved. Lily's death would stay meaningless. Marcus couldn't let that happen. He grabbed his pack and started loading it with absolute essentials. The laptop, 2 cases of the most damning evidence files, Rowland's final letters, his own photographs of key documents, the list of trusted contacts, Catherine's letter to Rowland, the notebook documenting Rowland's final days. It all weighed about 40 pounds, as much as he could carry while moving fast through rough terrain. The rest would have to stay. The fortune, the artifacts, all of it. Morrison would get it back, but at least Marcus would have proof of its existence. Proof of the crimes. He slung the pack over his shoulders and headed deeper into the cave, following Rowland's map toward the emergency exit marked on the back passages. The route wound through increasingly narrow tunnels, places where Marcus had to crawl, where the rock pressed in from all sides. Behind him, voices echoed from the main chamber. They were inside. Faster than he'd expected. Professional climbers, probably. Military trained. "Spread out," Morrison's voice carried through the stone. Calm, controlled. "Check every passage. If someone's been here recently, I want them found. Alive if possible, dead if necessary." Marcus moved faster, scraping his shoulders on rock, trying to be silent despite his pounding heart. The emergency exit had to be here somewhere. Rowland's map showed it connecting to a secondary cave system that opened a half-mile north of the main entrance. The tunnel forked. Marcus checked his compass, chose left, kept crawling. His headlamp caught something ahead, fresh air moving through a gap in the rock. A crack barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. This was it. The exit. Marcus pushed his pack through first, then started working his own body into the gap. Halfway through, his coat caught on something. He twisted, pulled, felt fabric tear, free. He emerged into a larger passage, this one sloping downward. Behind him, flashlight beams swept through the tunnel he'd just left. "Sir, I've got fresh tracks here," a voice called. Someone was definitely here. Recently. Find them, Morrison replied, closer now. I want to know who's been in my cave. Marcus ran. The passage descended steeply, treacherous with loose rock. He slipped twice, catching himself at the last second. The walls closed in again, then opened. He could see grey light ahead. The exit. He burst out into open air, gasping, and immediately realized his mistake. The emergency exit opened onto a narrow ledge about 20 feet up a sheer cliff face. No easy way down, no trail, just 100-foot drop to rocks and trees below. Marcus looked back, flashlight beams approaching fast through the cave. He looked down. Certain injury, possible death. He looked at the pack containing evidence that could destroy Morrison's empire and solve his wife's murder. Some choices weren't really choices at all. Marcus pulled climbing rope from his pack, looped it around a sturdy rock outcropping, and started rappelling down the cliff face. His hands shook. His technique was rusty, but adrenaline carried him down 15 feet, 20 feet, 25. A head poked out of the cave opening above. One of Morrison's men spotted him immediately. "He's here, on the south face, rappelling down." Marcus dropped the last 10 feet, hit hard, rolled, scrambled to his feet. The forest was thick here, old-growth pine and spruce. He ran into it without looking back, branches whipping his face, snow catching at his boots. Gunfire cracked behind him. Bullets punched through trees, showering him with bark and pine needles. Morrison's people weren't playing games. Marcus ran harder, zigzagging between trees, using every bit of cover. His lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he kept moving, kept distance growing between him and his pursuers. He could hear them coordinating behind him, voices calling out positions, directions. They were trained for this. He wasn't. His only advantage was desperation and intimate knowledge of these mountains from 5 years of living here. Marcus changed direction, heading toward a section of forest he knew had dense undergrowth and a stream that would mask his tracks. His breath came in ragged gasps. The pack felt like it weighed 100 pounds now, straps cutting into his shoulders. After what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, he stopped, pressing his back against a massive spruce trunk, trying to control his breathing, listening. Voices in the distance, men coordinating, spreading out, searching. They weren't giving up. Marcus checked his pack, everything intact. The laptop, the evidence files, Roland's letters, proof that could end Morrison. But Morrison had the cave now, had the fortune, had the artifacts, would probably destroy everything Roland had tried to preserve. Marcus waited until the voices faded, then started moving again, this time with direction, east toward a highway that cut through the mountains about 8 miles away. If he could reach it, flag down a car, get to a town, he might survive this. If. He walked through the afternoon, through the dusk, into darkness. Every sound made him flinch. Every shadow could be pursuit. His feet were numb from cold. His hands could barely grip the pack straps. But he forced himself forward, one step at a time, the way he'd learned to survive everything else in his life. By the time he saw headlights cutting through distant trees, marking the highway, his legs were barely holding him. Marcus emerged from the forest onto the shoulder of the road, covered in scratches, bleeding from a dozen minor cuts, pack still strapped to his back. He stepped into the road and waved his arms at an approaching truck. The driver, an older man hauling timber, nearly ran him over before slamming on the brakes. He rolled down his window. "Jesus, son, you look like you've been through hell. You need a hospital?" Marcus shook his head. "Just a ride. To the nearest town, please." The driver looked uncertain but nodded. "Get in." As the truck pulled away, Marcus glanced back at the mountains. Somewhere up there, Morrison and his men were probably still searching, finding the vault, recovering their stolen fortune, thinking they'd won. They had no idea that the real weapon, the evidence that could destroy them, was riding away in the cab of a logging truck, carried by a man who just decided that survival wasn't enough anymore. Marcus Webb had spent 5 years hiding from life. Now he was about to walk straight into the kind of war that people don't survive. But for the first time since losing Sarah and Lily, he felt something other than numbness. He felt purpose, and that was worth dying for. The timber truck dropped Marcus at a gas station on the outskirts of Leadville, Colorado, just after midnight. The driver had asked no questions beyond offering a thermos of coffee and a sandwich wrapped in foil. Marcus thanked him, watched the taillights disappear into darkness, and stood under the harsh fluorescent lights trying to figure out what came next. He had a backpack full of evidence that could destroy a criminal empire. He had no phone, no vehicle, no safe place to go. And somewhere behind him, Morrison's people were probably already mobilizing, spreading out across the region, searching for the man who'd escaped with their secrets. Marcus walked into the gas station. The clerk, a young woman with purple hair and tired eyes, looked up from her phone. "We close in 10 minutes. "I need to use your phone," Marcus said. "It's an emergency." She studied him, the scratches on his face, the torn jacket, the wild look in his eyes. "You running from someone?" Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, bad people." She slid her cell phone across the counter. "Make it quick." Marcus pulled out Roland's letter, the one with the list of trusted contacts. His hands shook as he unfolded it. 3 names had stars beside them. The first was a journalist named Rebecca Chen at the Denver Post. The second was an FBI agent named Michael Torres stationed in Colorado Springs. The third was a federal prosecutor named Linda Vasquez in Boulder. He dialed the journalist first. Voicemail. He didn't leave a message. He tried the FBI agent. The phone rang 6 times before a groggy voice answered. "Torres. My name is Marcus Webb. You don't know me, but Roland Harper left me your name. I have evidence, documents, files, everything needed to bring down James Morrison and Heritage Acquisitions International." Silence. Then, cautiously, "Who is this, really?" "I told you, Marcus Webb. I found Roland Harper's cave. I have his files. Morrison's people are hunting me right now. I need help." More silence. Marcus could hear Torres breathing, thinking. "Where are you?" "Gas station, Leadville, Highway 24. "Stay there. Don't talk to anyone. I'm 2 hours away. I'll come to you." "How do I know I can trust you?" Marcus asked. Torres's voice hardened. "You don't. But Roland Harper trusted me enough to put my name on that list. That's going to have to be enough." The call ended. Marcus handed the phone back to the clerk. She'd been listening, eyes wide. "You're in some kind of spy movie shit, aren't you?" Marcus almost laughed. "Something like that." "There's a diner next door," she said. "Stays open all night. You should wait there. Warmer. And people around. Safer." Marcus nodded his gratitude and walked next door. The diner was nearly empty. 1 trucker in a corner booth, a waitress refilling salt shakers. Marcus took a seat by the window where he could see the parking lot and ordered coffee he didn't drink. The 2 hours passed like molasses. Every car that pulled in made his heart race. Every stranger who walked through the door could be Morrison's people. But nobody came. Nobody except, finally, a dark sedan that parked under a streetlight. A man stepped out. 40s, Latino, wearing jeans and a FBI windbreaker. He scanned the parking lot before walking into the diner. His eyes found Marcus immediately. Agent Torres slid into the booth across from him without asking. "You look like hell." "Been a rough day," Marcus said. Torres leaned back, arms crossed. "Tell me everything. Start with how you found the cave." Marcus talked for 20 minutes. The elk hunt, the storm, the discovery, Roland's journals, The vault, the evidence, Sarah's murder, Morrison's arrival, the escape. All of it spilled out in a rush of words that felt like confession. Torres listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When Marcus finished, he sat quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Linda, it's Mike Torres. I need you awake and listening. We've got a situation." He paused. "Roland Harper. Yeah, the archaeologist. He's dead, but his evidence isn't. I'm sitting across from someone who has it all. Morrison. The whole network. Everything we've been trying to build a case on for 6 years." Marcus couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but Torres nodded several times. "Leadville, Pete's Diner. How soon can you get here?" Another pause. "Good. Bring your people. All of them. This is big." He ended the call and looked at Marcus. "Federal prosecutor Linda Vasquez is on her way with her team. We're going to lock you in protective custody, go through every document you have, and if it's half as good as you say, we're going to rain hell down on Morrison." "What about the fortune?" Marcus asked. "The artifacts in the cave?" Torres smiled grimly. If Morrison went back there, he just committed about 40 federal crimes: breaking and entering on public land, possession of stolen artifacts, illegal excavation. We'll hit that cave with a team before sunrise. Everything he touches becomes evidence. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. For the first time since finding the cave, he wasn't carrying this alone. The next 72 hours blurred together in a chaos of interviews, document reviews, and coordination between multiple federal agencies. Prosecutor Vasquez was a sharp woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and the kind of intensity that made witnesses squirm. She sat Marcus down in a safe house outside Boulder and went through every file, every photograph, every piece of evidence he'd brought out of the cave. Her team worked around the clock. Forensic accountants traced money through shell companies and offshore accounts. Digital specialists recovered files from Roland's laptop that even he hadn't known were there. Artifact authentication experts verified the inventory lists against international databases of stolen items, and slowly, meticulously, they built a case. On the 4th day, Agent Torres walked into the safe house with news. "We hit Morrison's warehouse in Denver 2 hours ago. Found 112 artifacts matching Roland's inventory, all reported stolen from various sites over the past 15 years. Morrison was there personally, trying to move everything out. We arrested him on site." Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "You got him?" "Him and 17 associates. We're still rounding up others from the network. Your evidence, Marcus? It's a roadmap. Names, dates, crimes. We've got enough to put Morrison away for 3 consecutive lifetimes." Marcus sat down slowly, trying to process. "What about my wife? Sarah Webb, the insurance investigator." Torres's expression softened. "We found the files on her. Thomas Kellerman, the driver who killed her, received $250,000 3 days before the accident, wired from one of Morrison's shell companies. We arrested Kellerman this morning. He's already trying to make a deal." Marcus's vision blurred. 5 years. 5 years he'd believed it was random chance. A drunk driver. Bad luck. Wrong place. Wrong time. But it had been murder. Calculated. Paid for. Executed. And now, finally, someone would pay for it. "Kellerman's willing to testify," Torres continued, "against Morrison, against Derek Morrison, against everyone involved in ordering the hit, in exchange for a reduced sentence." "How reduced?" Marcus's voice came out flat, dangerous. Torres met his eyes. 25 years instead of life. I know that's not justice, but his testimony locks down the case. Without it, Morrison's lawyers might find holes. Marcus stood and walked to the window. Outside, the safe house sat on acres of empty land, mountains visible in the distance. The same mountains where he'd hidden for 5 years, where he'd found Roland's cave, where everything had changed. "Do it," he said quietly. "Take the deal. I don't care about Kellerman. I want Morrison. I want everyone who gave the order, everyone who profited from my family's murder." 6 weeks later, Marcus sat in a federal courthouse in Denver, watching as James Morrison was arraigned on 173 federal charges: racketeering, money laundering, art theft, fraud, conspiracy to commit murder. The list went on for pages. Morrison stood at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, silver hair finally disheveled, face pale. He didn't look powerful anymore. He looked old and small and defeated. The judge denied bail. "Flight risk," she said. "Danger to witnesses." Morrison would await trial in federal custody. As marshals led him away, Morrison's eyes swept the gallery and locked onto Marcus. For just a moment, recognition flashed across his face. He knew. Somehow, he knew this was the man who'd destroyed his empire. Marcus didn't look away, didn't blink. Just met Morrison's gaze with the full weight of 5 years of grief and rage, and finally, justice. The trial lasted 4 months. Marcus testified for 3 days, walking the jury through everything he'd found in the cave. The artifacts, the evidence, Roland Harper's meticulous documentation of crimes spanning 2 decades. Sarah's case got its own section of the prosecution. Kellerman testified, voice shaking, describing how Derek Morrison had hired him to stage a drunk driving accident, how he'd been given photos of Sarah's car, her route home, the intersection where it needed to happen, how he'd practiced the timing for weeks. When Kellerman described the actual collision, how he'd watched Sarah's car crumple, how he'd seen a child's car seat in the back, Marcus had to leave the courtroom. He stood in the hallway, hands pressed against cold marble walls, trying to breathe through the rage. Agent Torres found him there. "You okay?" Marcus shook his head. "I'm never going to be okay, but I'm here. I'm standing. That's something." The jury deliberated for 8 hours. When they returned, the foreman read verdict after verdict. Guilty, 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 173 times guilty. James Morrison was sentenced to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. Derek Morrison got 65 years. Kellerman got his 25. 18 other members of the network received sentences ranging from 10 to 40 years. The Heritage Acquisitions International empire was destroyed. Assets seized, warehouses emptied. Every stolen artifact they could recover was being returned to its rightful owners. Museums, tribal nations, private collectors who'd been robbed. And the fortune in Roland's cave became the center of one final legal battle. Marcus sat in Prosecutor Vasquez's office 2 months after the verdicts. "The artifacts are being returned," she said. "That's straightforward. They were stolen property. But the cash and gold, that's more complicated." "How so?" Marcus asked. "Legally, you found it on public land, national forest. Technically, that makes it government property. But Roland Harper's will left everything to whoever solved his riddles and found the cave. His lawyers are arguing that makes it yours." Marcus stared at her. "I don't want it." Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "It's $73 million in cash and $41 million in gold. You don't want $114 million? "No," Marcus said firmly. "It's blood money, stolen from Morrison, who stole it from someone else. I don't want any part of it." "Then what do you want?" Marcus had been thinking about this for weeks. Create a foundation, the Harper Webb Foundation for Cultural Preservation. Use the money to fund legitimate archaeological research, to help tribal nations recover and protect their artifacts, to support the families of people who were killed or destroyed by Morrison's network. Let something good come from all this. Vasquez studied him for a long moment. "That's remarkably selfless." Marcus shook his head. "It's the only way I can live with myself." Sarah was investigating Morrison because she believed in truth and justice. Lily never got the chance to grow up and make the world better. This is for them. Let their deaths mean something beyond revenge. 3 months later, Marcus stood in a conference room in Boulder alongside Agent Torres, Prosecutor Vasquez, and representatives from 5 tribal nations. They'd just signed the papers establishing the Harper Webb Foundation. The board included archaeologists, tribal elders, museum curators, and Marcus himself. The foundation's mission was simple: protect cultural heritage, fund ethical archaeology, return stolen artifacts to their rightful communities, support education and preservation efforts, give Roland Harper's stolen fortune a purpose beyond enriching criminals. After the signing, a Navajo elder named Thomas B. Gay approached Marcus. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "Your foundation is funding the return of ceremonial items my people thought were lost forever. Items that were stolen from us generations ago. You've given us back our history." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I'm just trying to do what should have been done years ago." Begay shook his head. "You did more than that. You risked your life. You could have taken the money and disappeared. Instead, you chose to honor the past and heal the future. That's the action of a man with a strong spirit." That night, Marcus drove back to the mountains for the first time since escaping Morrison's people. His cabin was still there, exactly as he'd left it. Snow had piled against the door. The wood stove was cold. The silence was absolute. But this time the silence didn't feel like drowning. It felt like peace. He spent the next week cleaning, repairing, preparing. Not to hide anymore, but to build. The foundation needed someone to oversee field research in the Rockies, to work with tribal consultants on identifying sacred sites that needed protection, to train new archaeologists in ethical practices. Marcus had found his purpose. Not in revenge, though that had been necessary. Not in isolation, though that had been healing, but in service. In using everything he'd learned, everything he'd lost, everything he'd survived to make sure no one else's heritage got stolen and sold to the highest bidder. 6 months after the trial ended, Marcus stood at the entrance to Roland's cave. It had been officially designated a protected archaeological site. The foundation was funding a proper excavation and documentation of the ancient Puebloan dwelling. The vault where Roland had hidden his stolen fortune was being converted into a climate-controlled archive for recovered artifacts awaiting return to their communities. Marcus walked through the familiar passages, no longer running, no longer afraid. In the main chamber, a team of archaeologists worked carefully, documenting every detail of the original structure. One of them, a young woman named Sarah, looked up and smiled. She'd been named after Marcus's wife. He'd told her the story during her interview, and she'd cried and said she'd be honored to carry that name while doing this work. In the back passage, where the steel vault door still stood open, a plaque had been installed. The Roland Harper Memorial Archive, established by the Harper Webb Foundation, in memory of those who gave their lives protecting our shared cultural heritage. Marcus touched the plaque, thinking of Roland, of Catherine, of Sarah and Lily, all the lives cut short, all the love lost, all the pain that had led to this moment of healing. He pulled out a photograph from his wallet. Sarah and Lily at Lily's 6th birthday party, the last good day, the last normal moment. He'd carried it for 5 years, barely able to look at it without breaking. But now he studied their faces and felt something different. Not just grief, but gratitude. Gratitude that he'd known them, that he'd loved them, that their memory had driven him to do something that mattered. "I hope I made you proud," he whispered. "I hope this is what you would have wanted." The photograph didn't answer. But somehow, standing in this cave where death had hidden a fortune and a broken man had left a final gift, Marcus felt like maybe finally they could rest. And maybe he could too. That evening, Marcus attended a community meeting in the small town nearest to the cave site. Word had spread about the foundation, about the archaeological work, about the jobs being created. The town had been dying, population dwindling, businesses closing. But now there was hope. The mayor, a weathered woman named Patricia, stood at the podium. 5 years ago, a stranger moved into our mountains and we barely noticed. He kept to himself, bought supplies and disappeared. We thought he was just another hermit running from something. She looked directly at Marcus, sitting in the back row. We didn't know he'd find something that would change everything. Not just for him, but for all of us. The Harper Webb Foundation has brought jobs to our town. Purpose, pride. We're becoming a center for ethical archaeology and cultural preservation. Students are coming here to learn. Tribal representatives are working with us. We matter again. Applause filled the room. People turned to look at Marcus. Some nodded, some smiled. A few even approached after the meeting to shake his hand, to thank him, to tell him their stories. An older man named Bill pulled Marcus aside. My granddaughter just got accepted to the Foundation's internship program. Full scholarship. She's the first person in our family to go to college. That's because of you. Marcus shook his head. That's because of her. I just opened a door. Sometimes, Bill said, that's all people need. Someone to open a door they thought was locked forever. Over the following year, Marcus watched the ripples spread. The Foundation funded archaeological projects across the Southwest. Dozens of artifacts were returned to tribal nations in ceremonies that brought elders to tears. Museum partnerships were established. Educational programs launched. Young people who'd never considered archaeology as a career found themselves passionate about protecting the past. And Marcus found himself healing in ways he hadn't thought possible. The work didn't erase Sarah and Lily's deaths. Nothing could. But it gave their loss meaning. It transformed his grief into something constructive, something that helped others, something that honored their memory by making the world a little bit better. He started speaking at universities, telling the story of Roland Harper and the cave. Not to glorify what he'd done, but to teach about the importance of ethical archaeology, about the damage caused by black market artifact trading, about the real human cost of treating cultural heritage as commodities to be bought and sold. Students listened with wide eyes. Some came up afterward with questions. Others just wanted to shake his hand. One young man, studying to become an FBI agent, told Marcus that his story had inspired him to specialize in art crimes. Someone needs to stop people like Morrison before they destroy more history, before they kill more people like your wife. Marcus encouraged him. The world needs people willing to stand up. Just be careful. These criminals are dangerous. They have resources. They don't hesitate to hurt people. I know, the student said. That's exactly why someone has to stop them. 2 years after finding the cave, Marcus returned to Denver for the first time since the trial. He visited Sarah and Lily's graves, something he'd been unable to do for 5 years. The cemetery was quiet, peaceful, maintained by the foundation he'd established in their names. He knelt between their headstones. I'm sorry it took me so long to come back. I'm sorry I ran instead of fighting. But I want you to know I finally did fight. I brought down the people who took you from me. And I'm trying to make sure your deaths meant something. He placed flowers on each grave. The foundation is doing good work. We've returned over 300 artifacts to their rightful owners. We've created jobs and scholarships. We've protected sites from being looted. Roland Harper's blood money is becoming something beautiful. A breeze moved through the cemetery, rustling leaves. Marcus sat quietly, feeling the sun on his face, listening to birds in nearby trees. For the first time since the accident, He didn't feel like he was drowning in guilt and grief. He felt like maybe, possibly, he was allowed to keep living, to keep fighting, to keep making their memory mean something. When he finally stood to leave, he noticed someone watching from a distance. An older woman, probably in her 70s, walking slowly between graves. She approached hesitantly. "Are you Marcus Webb?" she asked. He nodded, wary. "I'm Catherine Harper's sister, Roland's sister-in-law." She extended a frail hand. "I wanted to thank you for finishing what Roland started, for making his death mean something." Marcus took her hand gently. "I'm sorry for your loss. Roland was remarkable. Flawed, but remarkable." She smiled sadly. "Aren't we all? He loved Catherine so much. After she died, he was lost. I tried to help, but he pushed everyone away. I didn't know about the cave or the stolen artifacts or any of it until the trial. I was angry at first, ashamed. But then I saw what you'd done with his legacy, the foundation, the returns, the healing. You gave his story a better ending than he could have written himself." They walked together through the cemetery, talking about Roland and Catherine, about love and loss, about how grief can either destroy us or transform us into something stronger. When they parted, she hugged Marcus tightly. "Thank you for choosing transformation, for yourself and for my brother." That night, Marcus drove back to his cabin in the mountains. The place looked different now, no longer a hiding spot, but a home. He'd added solar panels for electricity, installed a better wood stove, built a workshop where he restored old tools and equipment for the Foundation's field teams. But most importantly, he'd hung photographs on the walls. Sarah and Lily, Roland and Catherine, the team at the Foundation, students at excavation sites, tribal elders receiving returned artifacts. The walls told a story now, not of isolation and hiding, but of connection and purpose. Marcus made dinner, simple but satisfying. As he ate, he thought about the journey from that first day tracking elk in a storm to this moment of quiet contentment. He'd lost everything, found a fortune, discovered the truth about his family's murder, brought down a criminal empire, and somehow, through it all, found a reason to keep living. Not just surviving, living. There was a difference. The next morning brought unexpected news. Agent Torres called. "Marcus, we've got a situation. One of Morrison's associates, guy named Vincent Carr, just got paroled early. Political connections. His lawyers found a technicality. He's out." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "What does that mean?" "It means he knows you're the one who brought down the network. And he's got resources, friends. We've picked up chatter that he might be looking for payback. I'm arranging protective detail for you." "No," Marcus said firmly. "I'm not going into hiding again. I spent 5 years hiding. I'm done." Torres sighed. "Marcus, these people are dangerous." "I know, but I can't live in fear. If Carr wants to come after me, he knows where to find me. But I'm not changing my life. I'm not letting them win by making me afraid." For 3 weeks, Marcus went about his normal routine. Foundation work, site visits, community meetings. He was careful, vigilant, but not paralyzed. And then one evening, as he returned to his cabin, he found someone waiting on his porch. Vincent Carr sat on the steps, hands visible, no weapon apparent. He was smaller than Marcus expected, late 50s, tired looking. "I'm not here to hurt you," Carr said immediately. "I'm here to apologize." Marcus stopped 10 feet away. "Apologize." Carr nodded. "I spent 3 years in federal prison thinking about what I'd done. The artifacts we stole, the sites we destroyed, the people we hurt. Your wife, that little girl. I can't change any of it, but I can say I'm sorry, and I can tell you that you did the right thing. Morrison deserved everything he got, We all did. Marcus studied him. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't, Carr said. I'm a criminal, a thief, part of a network that murdered innocent people. But prison changes you, or it changed me anyway. I found religion, started reading about the cultures we robbed, the damage we did. I want to make amends. How? Carr pulled out a folder. I documented everything I know about other networks. Morrison wasn't the only one. There are 3 major operations still running. Locations, names, methods, everything I can remember. Give this to your FBI friend. Maybe it'll save some lives, protect some sites. I can't undo my crimes, but maybe I can prevent future ones. He set the folder on the porch and stood slowly. That's all. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that what you did mattered. You didn't just stop Morrison. You woke some of us up, made us see what we'd become. Carr walked away into the darkness. Marcus waited until he was gone, then picked up the folder. Inside were detailed notes about smuggling operations, corrupt officials, planned heists, information that could prevent countless crimes. He called Torres immediately. By morning, the FBI had teams mobilizing based on Carr's intelligence. Within weeks, 2 more artifact smuggling rings were dismantled. Dozens of arrests, hundreds of recovered items. The ripples kept spreading. From one cave to one fortune to one trial to global impact. Marcus had started this journey looking for elk in a storm. He'd ended it, changing the world. 3 years after finding the cave, Marcus stood at a ceremony honoring the Harper Webb Foundation's work. They'd returned over 800 artifacts to their rightful owners, created 50 permanent jobs, funded 30 archaeological projects, established scholarship programs that had sent 42 students to college. The keynote speaker was Thomas Begay, the Navajo elder Marcus had met at the Foundation's launch. He spoke about cultural preservation, about healing historical wounds, about the importance of people like Marcus and Roland who chose to do right even when it was hard. In our tradition, Begay said, we believe that every action creates ripples that spread forever. One person's courage can change the world. One person's integrity can heal generations of pain. Marcus Webb and Roland Harper, in their own ways, showed us that truth. They remind us that it's never too late to choose justice, to choose healing, to choose love over hate. After the ceremony, as people mingled and celebrated, Marcus found himself alone for a moment, looking out over the mountains where this had all begun. He thought about the man he'd been 3 years ago, broken, isolated, barely alive. He thought about the journey that had transformed him, the cave, the evidence, the trial, the foundation, all of it flowing from one decision to stop running and start fighting. A young woman approached. She introduced herself as Maria, a graduate student using foundation funding to research ancestral Pueblo and migration patterns. I just wanted to thank you, she said. Your foundation made my research possible. But more than that, your story inspired me to pursue this work. You proved that one person really can make a difference. Marcus smiled. I didn't do it alone. Roland Harper did the hard work. Agent Torres and Prosecutor Vasquez brought the legal expertise. The Foundation Board provides guidance. It takes a community to change things. Maybe, Maria said, but someone has to start. Someone has to be brave enough to take the first step. You were that person. After she left, Marcus pulled out his wallet and looked at the photograph of Sarah and Lily one more time. It was worn now, edges soft from handling. But their faces still smiled back at him, frozen in that perfect moment of joy. I hope you can see this, he whispered. I hope you know that your deaths weren't meaningless, that something good came from something terrible, that I finally stopped hiding and started living again. The photograph didn't answer, but in his heart, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years, peace, real, deep, lasting peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. The knowledge that he'd taken his grief and rage and loss and transformed them into something that helped others, that honored his family's memory, that made the world measurably better. He returned the photo to his wallet and walked back into the celebration. There was work to do, sites to protect, artifacts to return, students to mentor, a foundation to run, a legacy to build. Marcus Webb had come to the mountains to die in silence. He'd found instead a reason to live out loud, to fight, to heal, to transform pain into purpose and loss into legacy. And somewhere in a cave high in the Rockies, where ancient peoples had once built their homes and a broken archaeologist had hidden his final gift, the walls held secrets that had changed one man's life and rippled out to change countless others. Because sometimes the most valuable thing you can find isn't gold or cash or priceless artifacts. Sometimes it's the courage to do what's right even when it costs you everything. The integrity to choose justice over safety. The wisdom to transform your darkest moments into light for others. Marcus had found all of that in a cave he'd stumbled into during a storm. And in doing so, he'd found himself. Anyone can choose to run when life breaks them. Anyone can hide in the mountains and wait for the pain to stop. But it takes real courage to stand up, to fight back, to take the broken pieces of your life and build something beautiful from the wreckage. It takes real strength to honor the dead by living well, by making their memory mean something beyond grief. As the sun set over the Colorado Rockies, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus Webb stood on the porch of his cabin and felt, for the first time in 8 years, genuinely grateful to be alive. Not just existing, not just surviving, but living with purpose and passion and the quiet knowledge that every day he chose to keep fighting was a victory over the darkness that had once consumed him. The mountain man who'd explored a cliff cave home and found $280 million had discovered something far more valuable. The truth that healing is possible, that justice matters, that one person's courage really can change the world, and that the greatest fortune isn't what you find, but what you do with it. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible true stories of courage, discovery, and transformation. Click now to continue the journey with us. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that sometimes the most valuable treasures are the ones that teach us how to live again.